Everything in a business is the owner's fault. They either hired it, did it, or allowed it to happen.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey there. Welcome to The New Rules with Alan Pentz, where we help you navigate today's chaos with precision. Your host, Alan Pentz, has 25 years of experience working in business and government, and he knows how the old rules have fallen apart. Each episode, we'll explore how to thrive in this new landscape by mastering the new rules while everyone else is still figuring them out. Let's dive in.
So today we are going to be talking about the growth path of Corner Alliance as like sort of a metaphor analogy for how small businesses grow and the owners learn through beating their heads against the wall and chewing glass for year after year until they figure out how to do it better. That's sort of like my story. I took the pain for you, so I'm trying to help you not take as much pain as I did.
Yeah, and now you're going to tell everybody what your trajectory was. Are you going to talk a little bit first, just what is Corner Alliance, right? You started it in 2007. It's a government consulting firm.
Yeah, so it's professional services for the federal government, which is fun right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I've owned it since end of 2007. Started it, bootstrapped it, no funding. Started it with a partner. And it was just he and I for a little while. And I had worked in the industry before. And, I grew it with him for several years. I ended up buying him out in mid-2010s, mid to late 2010s, and then kept growing the firm. And now we just did about 35 million last year. So quite a bit of growth in the last few years. But the journey to get there was, I call it the 18-year overnight success. So it was a lot of grinding in those 18 years. To get that growth at the end. And so we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And I think you said, I'd just like to read what you've written on your Institute website. That when you started out, you said that you had no idea how to run a business, right? It took years of mistakes, losing money, hiring and firing all the wrong people, and untold stress to learn a better way. So you are going to save others from the same stress, misery, and glass chewing.
Yes, last year. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, I also started when we started it, it's like a boring regular business. Like I worked in that industry before as an employee. And I always say nobody needed another government consulting firm. Like there were plenty of them. No one was asking for another one. So it wasn't like I had some great idea. I mean, and maybe I knew a niche in the market and that I had a client set and I had experience there. So that obviously helps. But yeah, it wasn't idea based. There was no funding behind it. I basically got a client before we started. And so I had to fund myself for 30 plus, I don't know what our collection terms were back then, probably net 30. So it's probably 60 days I had to fund myself, which, that wasn't too terrible. And yeah, just kind of stumbled into it. And I'd gotten an MBA several years before.
Right?
Yeah, so I knew how to drink beer and I knew what NPV meant. That was about it.
I think you did that before grad school, though.
Yeah, I knew how to drink beer before grad school. Not NPV, though. I didn't know.
You got a graduate degree in
net present value for those non-finance people out there. So, yeah, I feel like that MBA did nothing for me. I mean, an MBA trains you how to be a mid-level finance official in a Fortune 1000 company. It doesn't train you how to run a small business. And,
how to run a business. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't take too many accounting classes and stuff like that. So I didn't get all the practical skills I needed.
What did you do?
Drink beer and had fun. I was at UT Austin. So
right. That's right. The beer drinking.
Yes, beer drinking. I got to know a lot of people. So yeah. So when we started out, it was really just me and my partner billing our time. Or my partner and I, sorry, incorrect grammar there. And we were classic employees of our company. Well, I say we're employees of the company who happen to pay ourselves because we were basically in the business every day. We were the business. I mean, I was 95% billable if we were lucky. And, we had hired one back office person who really wasn't that experienced with back office stuff. So that wasn't exactly smooth.
Can I interrupt you for a minute there, though, Alan? Because I want to go back to a minute. You said a couple of minutes ago, you kind of just bumbled into this, right? And you got a client, but was there one moment or experience or something that happened where you're no, I want to do this on my own. I'm not going to work for somebody else. did you realize that when you were still at UT Austin? What was it? Or did you literally just bumble into a client? Like, take us back to that.
Yeah. So I think there were two probably things. One is I had worked for this company that grew really quickly, and I was a big part of that growth, and that was great. But it got sold, and it turned into like a regular old big company, and that was really disappointing. So I left there, went to work at another place for a little bit, and they gave me, this is back in 07, remember, so the iPhone had just come out, and they didn't have the keyboard wouldn't, go to the landscape of there. And so I couldn't type on it. My fingers are too big. So what I wanted was a Blackberry Curve. That was like the cool phone.
Oh, remember
And
that?
I got,
Blackberries.
yeah, so that's how old we are, right? So yeah, like I went to this new place and they gave me like a hand-me-down Sprint Nextel Blackberry that looked like, I don't know, like a car phone from like 1985. And I was like, what is this? I'm like, I feel like Team B,
It
So
was like Knight Rider. It didn't make you feel like Knight Rider.
yeah, a little bit, right? Except it didn't really talk back to me. And, so I kind of say like I started the company because I wanted to get the cell phone I wanted. And I know my wife said that you can't start a company just to get the kind of cell phone you want. And I said, oh, yes, I can. But watch me. So to this day, I never put a case on my cell phone, right? Because that's my little treat to myself.
Really? Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Fun facts already. We're just a few minutes in.
And, I say like there was some risk to doing it, but in reality, like I had a client lined up. I had relationships. The worst thing in the world was I would have had to go get a job again, which I already had. So like, what was the real risk there? I mean, a little bit, but not a ton. And the real risk comes later after you have employees and all this stuff, right? So, starting out, and then the other thing was, I had two young kids at home, more about to. I had one coming. And I had a buddy of mine who went to business school with me. And I was talking to him about it. Should I do this? Should I not? And he was like, you know what? You're never getting any cheaper. So do it now.
Right.
And I was like, that's a great point. With another kid out of the way. And my wife wasn't working I guess she was working part-time still then. And then, after we had the second kid in 08, then she stopped working. So it was a little stressful there, at the beginning. But the beginning was good. I mean, because we had those connections, like we were able to take the company up to like, we don't have the figures anymore, but I think we were around 800,000 in the first year.
Okay.
And that was great, because we were able to and what you're really doing in a business like that is you're subsidizing the client, because for them to access me at that point, they would have had to pay some other company like double the rate. Right. But we were able to cut that rate because we didn't have all the overhead and all the other stuff. Right. So that's really how you kind of get an advantage when you're starting. You're essentially selling high quality services for a much lower amount.
To reduce the rate.
Right. And so what I say is that's that first hurdle that businesses hit. If given that you have experience in your field and you're like, you come in with relationships and an ability to like sell a little bit, you're going to get to that. Hey, I'm a really good employee for my company and I can kind of bill my time, or I can, if you're selling a product, it's a little different, but it's like I'm able to like do hands-on stuff with customers and clients, and I'm really subsidizing the business at that point because you can do it while you're small and you don't have infrastructure. But the first real barrier is about, I think, around $1 million, sometimes $2 million, because we call them black holes, right? Where people tend to get stuck. And it's because, they need to change. And this is the whole theory behind Owner Institute, because what the company needs from the owner and what the owner needs to do, like the decisions she or he needs to make, change in character as the company grows, right? And so kind of our principle is like understanding what are those inflection points so that you are prepared, right? When we built out like
And those will be different for each company, each person.
A little bit, but they'll be similar, right? They'll be in the same zip code, right? So it's not, some people will be a little bit above on one factor and a little bit below on another, it's not exact.
Sure.
But I kind of broke it out like a 9-box grid of like level of company, like by revenue, and then stage of sophistication within that level of revenue. It's like what I said is like, yeah, I could have gone and bought like an amazing ERP system and built all these processes for a $500,000 to $700,000 company and issued 2 invoices, right? That's not worth the effort. So don't spend your money on that. Now, when you're 10 and you're going to another inflection point, 10 million in revenue, and then like you have 35 invoices and everything's kind of chaotic, that's when you need that system. But you don't need it when you're below $1 million. So like part of it is the stage of company, the level of sophistication you should get to is lower in a smaller company, right? I mean, you shouldn't have the bells and whistles of a 5, 10, $25 million company. So the philosophy is really, looking at it, you get started. The first thing you've got to do is prove that you have a real business and not just a job where you happen to pay yourself. And that's about getting over about $1 million.
Okay.
So what I say is the first challenge almost always. Now, well, the other thing to keep in mind here is we're not talking about venture capital funded businesses.
Yeah.
So they get funding so they can shoot through these black holes and they can hire the person they should hire. Like if you're going by cash flow, the person you can hire at 4 or 5 million, you can maybe hire them when you're $1 million or less because you have venture capital money, right? But you can't do that in most companies. So anyway, so just take them.
Need to make,
Yeah, put them aside. So they're taking on the black holes with a lot of money. And you don't have that necessarily when you start. So almost always the first thing that an owner should do is get rid of everything but sales. And potentially if it's more product based, like marketing. Some owners are just really good at getting leads in and like the closing isn't as hard. But particularly in like professional services business, sales, it's what it's all about. And so the first, I call it like when you're, just I would say even below like 2 million, like if you think about an orange, like the juice is inside, right? And the juice is your sales to clients. And so you got to peel away all the bitter.
The rind, the hard bitter rind.
Right. So one piece of rind is like, you shouldn't be doing bookkeeping. You shouldn't be sending invoices. You shouldn't be scheduling your meetings. You shouldn't be. So you got to, as you get over 500K, getting up toward $1 million, you got to start finding ways, whether it's virtual assistants or others, to peel off some of those bitter rind pieces, right? And then the ultimate really is, even before you do anything else, is to try to reduce your level of customer delivery or customer interaction that isn't selling, right? So I know a lot of people that's tough, but it's easier to hire someone to serve a customer than it is to hire someone who can sell a customer. It's a different skill set. And usually the owner is the only one with that. And so I face a lot of business owners who I coach who come in and they're 1.5 million and they're like, I'm going to go hire a sales guy or gal. And I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. Because first of all, you have no system set up for sales. You're kind of just doing it yourself. People are doing it because they like you, right? And they trust you. You're subsidizing yourself because you should be working in another company making more money. And so as a result, there are people out there that can come in and build a sales system from scratch, figure out what you're selling and do it really well. But they make $1.5 million a year and work at Oracle, right? They don't work for you, right? So you're not going to be able to get that guy or gal. And the other thing here, I often see maybe more like 2 million is the other solution is I'm going to get someone who's going to run my business for me. And then I'm going to go do something else. That's a disaster too, right? You have no infrastructure. Right.
At this point, we're still talking about around the 1 million mark, more or less. 1.5.
So one of the key concepts we have in Owner Institute is our whole methodology is based around the level of the owner independence from a business over time and at each stage. And the level of independence and what you can get independence from, or freedom, if you want to call it that, it changes, right? So when you're like below $1 million, the real independence you can get, because you are the business, the real independence you can get is from admin, and then potentially customer delivery when you get a little bigger. So
like somebody to your schedule, for example.
Right. So
you might have been doing yourself even.
So like if you can get independence from these like sort of routine rote tasks that you might not like and free up time to, you can stay there and just do that. That's fine. Not work more. But usually what you do is you devote that game time to selling so you can get a little bit.
So that's like the first.
Yeah. So that first usually caps out around 2. I mean, sometimes it's 3. But usually what happens is the owners figured out how to sell and sell beyond themselves, because obviously they're not going to be delivering at 2 million. It gets a little, too much work. So they're hiring in people to deliver. And what usually happens is some form of chaos. So, you're starting to pump these customers in. And what was going on before was you did all this stuff by yourself. So you just did it, right? And no one had to learn how to do it. And you didn't have to document it, on and on and on, right? So you start hiring people in and you have no systems to onboard them, train them, teach them. You probably don't even have values and stuff to like help them understand how they're supposed to act.
Yeah, you have even work now.
So really at that point, what you get is chaos, because you're throwing work into the company and the company can't absorb it, most likely. And that kind of goes on from like 2 to 3 up to 5. And really, so the owner gets sucked more back into details of the business. So as you move up these quadrants, unfortunately, you take steps back, right, in certain areas. But the goal is, if you are smart about it and don't do what I did and sit there for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you can get to the next quadrant where things get better faster, right?
Okay.
And then you can make a decision, do I want to go on? Because like at the end of each row, it's kind of like 3 things in each row. The end of each row is kind of like a stable part of the business area, like level of the business where you can have like a pretty good stable life. And now your level of freedom and independence is based on how big the company is. So if you really want full autonomy, you got to kind of go through the whole thing. But you can get to levels where, you're working less, you're making more money, and you kind of like the company the way it is. So maybe you don't want to go on and grow because you're going to go back to chaos again every time you go through.
And that's something that you would help coaching clients recognize, right? Because the thinking like, of course, we're just going to keep growing and growing and growing. And maybe that's not what they actually envision for themselves. They just think they do.
That's right. So you got to be really conscious and know, because you're going to make yourself miserable the way I did. Like, I got up to about 3, 2, well, I think it was around 4. It was around 3 going into 4 that we really got hit. And like, we were stuck there for 3 or 4 years. I was just reviewing it's like 2012 to 2014, 15. And
what was going on? Walk us through a little bit more in detail. In terms of why were you so miserable? Were you stuck in that doing more, you needed more, but you're doing it yourself? You didn't have the systems in place. Like, what was the misery?
I mean, we did exactly what I said. Like, we sold a bunch more work and hired people in and like didn't have any systems to support them. So like, first of all, you're running around putting out fires with clients because you have people working with them who don't necessarily know how to deliver the way you do.
Right.
You're still trying to sell while you're doing that. And then there was no one in the back office who knew how to run a company of that size. So we had no projections, for finances or anything. I didn't know how to get into the bank account. I mean, we were spending money on no one should spend money on, but no one was really reviewing it. It was like someone would call and be like, oh, we need this. And it'd be like, okay, like they should know processes. So it took, and I say we went in 2014, I think it was. Our accountants brought us into a meeting at the end of the year to figure, because accountants, all they do is figure out how to pay your taxes, right? They don't actually help you run your business. So they came in and they were like, hey, congratulations. You just made $600,000 on 4 million, right? Pretty good. I'm like, awesome. That's so cool. Yeah. Where's my $600,000? Because I don't have it. And, at that point I called cash in the business was sort of like a waiter in a New York restaurant. He's there, but you can't get your hands on him, right? So we're sitting there going, where's our cash, man? And then we finally hired this woman who had experience at our old bigger company a couple of years on, and she started doing projections. And then we're sitting there and like maybe late November, early December, we go meet with her a couple of weeks later and she's like, hey, you're going to start losing money in January. And so all that cash that we had coming in, most of it was coming in on accounts receivable, was all going to go out accounts, it was all going to go negative and fund deficits because we had some work had reduced. We kind of knew what was going on, but we were trying to ignore it because we knew that meant probably like laying people off, and we didn't want to do that. So we ignored it, right? And then it kept going on. And then we were putting money on our line of credit, which is freaking terrible thing to do for that line of credit is meant to help you when you grow. You're funding the growth until you get paid. We were funding losses. That's not a good thing on your line of credit. So
No paycheck in sight necessarily.
Yeah. And we've been kind of stuck at this level for several years. And now we started losing money. We're going backwards. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on here? So that really led me on my journey that I'm talking about today, the owner's journey of like trying to figure out how to run this company better. Right. And what did it need from us? What do we need to be doing? I had no idea. So I started, I was going on YouTube because I wasn't sleeping very well. So I was like going 2 young kids at home, losing, putting debt on a line of credit. And
domestic harmony isn't that's got to be tough. Like other things in your life, right?
Yeah, it's brutal. So, I found this guy, Greg Crabtree, who runs a company called Simple Numbers, and he's the rare accountant that figured out how to help you run your business. And he had a bunch of principles around how do you measure the output of the labor you're paying for? How do you look at your business every month to figure out where you're going? And so, I started reading him. I started reading some other books like Profit First and, Traction and a few other, the classic, E-Myth Revisited and the classic business books. And I started really understanding, the problem here is like, we're not actually running a business. We're working we're not working on it. And so it's really at that $5 million level, that 3 to 5, where you've got to start working on now you can't do it every day because you're still, the company's small. It depends on you. But that's where you got to start making this transition to working on versus in all the time. And one of the key, go ahead.
I was going to say, so at this point, what was the most difficult? Because I'm just thinking, you're going through this whole period now. You're like, how do we get out of this? You're doing all this research yourself. You're not sleeping. At some point where you like, do I keep going or just?
You're kind of stuck, you
have to make that decision, right? Or what was the most difficult decision you had?
You have contracts, you have people depending on you. You can't just like walk away, right? So a couple of things. Like one, in the moment, like tactically in the moment, we did have to lay some people off. So that was really hard. It was our first time doing that. And luckily, pretty soon after that, we won another contract. So that really got us out of the hole. So we were lucky. But in the, 30,000 foot, what I really learned is we needed, one, to get some better vendors in. So this is one of the things people don't really talk about. It's like when you're 1 million, your lawyer, your accountant, your other people might be like sort of work with business, but might be like personal kind of people too. And then when you're getting up to 3 to 4, you need to get people who actually work with people like you and are better. Like finding Greg Crabtree to help us look at our finances was like a total revelation, right? And so it's like bringing in new people like that. And then I say the key decision in that place, in that $3 to $5 million range, is hiring the right person who can help you run the company in areas where you are weaker. And again, it's about getting back to more owner independence. At this stage, you probably want to get out of all back office kind of stuff and potentially all customer delivery stuff. Because as that chaos, you kind of did that a little bit at one, got a little bit more out of it. You had some like admin type help. But then as the chaos grows, you get sucked back more in because things start breaking and you got to go fix it, right? So at this stage, you got to go get somebody who can actually operate independently from you, right? For some period of time. And they can like invoice and do projections and maybe, do all these different things that you're not focused on because you're out there with the clients. And that was a more expensive hire. So that was that woman from her own company, right? And often what happens is people, either they try to hire a cheap resource at that stage, because that worked at 1 million. Why wouldn't it work at 3 to 4? Or they just hire the wrong person. They just don't have that much experience hiring, or you just get unlucky, right? So a lot of times people will, and it's a big hit, right? It's a hit on profitability hiring this person. And you'll see companies start, they're growing, they hire that person, they go back down because they hired the wrong person. And one of the keys in that quadrant is the owner's got to learn to become ruthless. And this is a really hard thing. Most owners don't grow past this point because of this problem.
To become boisterous? Is that what you said?
No, to become ruthless.
Ruthless. Yeah.
So when you hire a new person for that kind of role, it's a 12-month salary that you look at. But what you got to say is, no, I'm just spending 3 months of this to see whether they're good. And they weren't, because you're going to have to fire them, right? And most people hang on for too long and they try to, like to try to coach them. I mean, of course you set people up well, but like the person who's going to work for you there is going to be able to figure stuff out on their own. They have to. And so, and you could spend a lot of time coaching and stuff, and people can change over time. Some people can, but you don't have 2 years to train them, right? You're drowning. So you can't.
Did you spend that time in your experience at Corner Alliance? Did you do that? Did you spend too much time on people you shouldn't have? Can you talk about that? Or was that that's a lesson you learned?
Yeah. And I would say that the real lesson on that for me came a little later in our growth.
Mm-hmm.
At this point for us, it was really back office systems and helping us get to the point where we were selling more, doing less client delivery, and being more systematic about how we were working on the business. And then the hire worked out. But I've seen it in multiple. Well, and there was one person we did have to move out of back office stuff because it wasn't working well.
Mm-hmm.
But she got another job in the company. So it wasn't as wrenching. But I've seen that in multiple companies where they hire the person who's going to help, and then they're not that great. And then 6 months later, they're still telling me about how they're hoping they're going to get here.
Get
I'm
better.
like, it's time to cut it. You don't have time to train them. So we shot up after that. We hit like 7, then 9, then 10, something like that over the next, few years. So like you can see this with these black holes. You'll get stuck for years at 4 million. And all of a sudden you'll fix whatever it is. And then you'll shoot to 7 to 10 real quick because you figured out something real important. But guess what? It doesn't stop. Everything changes.
Just keep going.
Yes. So then the problem you get in the next phase is like, usually sales is going pretty well. And, delivery is variable, but over time you can kind of figure it out, operations delivery. What I find starts happening when you grow is that you've got to start adding leaders into key roles. So before you were I need someone who can operate independently and kind of do back office stuff, right? Now you might need like a dedicated HR person and a dedicated finance person. And
like a leadership team.
Right. So this is more, the team, I would say a full team is when you're more like 10, but from 5 to 10, you're kind of figuring out who do I need to start putting on that team. So you're making, 2 to 3 out of the 4 hires over that period. And what you'll find is that maybe that person you hired at 3 or other people that were like, because what tends to happen here too is, again, as you launch over 5, certain things kind of break, the scale of it. You're trying to hire new client, for us, it was new client delivery people, and they have an inconsistent quality. Plus, we had to go past our existing network because it was just too many people. So that was really tough, learning how to hire, learning how to manage those people, get them out, get the right people in the client. So that was like a lot of work. But I felt like we were doing it, right? But what happens is in that chaos, there are a lot of people who are heroes or heroines, I call them, right? And so when things break, they just go figure out how to make it work. And those people are awesome and they get you through. But by the time you're getting up to 10, the problem is those people can't get you past that because they don't go into a lane and then structure the lane. They want to be running around fighting fires. And, that's awesome for when you need it. But I mean, I remember a day, when the next kind of black hole was hitting us around 7 to 10, I was saying like, we got to have process over heroics, like, no more heroic. If someone does something heroic, that means the process.
And it says over heroics.
Yeah, we need to go figure out the process, right? So I said that I didn't know how to do it. I just said it for month after month until we started like actually looking at documenting. Hey, when we onboard somebody, this is what we do, and so then we started doing that, right? And the people who were the firefighters had a lot of trouble with it, and so I spent 3-4 years basically with those people either quitting or us having to fire them. And so we had to change over 50% plus of the team to get there because they just couldn't do it.
It makes sense though, because processes, if they're good processes, right, are sustainable. Heroics aren't.
Right. And I mean, they're sustainable in the sense that like you can stay churning and like at some point everybody burns out, but like you can churn for a long time with no process. You just have to grow, right?
Right.
So like to me, the perfect example here is when you're in that 7 to 10 range. So I said before, back when you're at 1, even up to 5, the owner is the person who sells, right? That's or markets or whatever. So that's the only person that could do it. Well, now we're getting to a point where like my method of sales doesn't work anymore to keep growing bigger chunks. Now you got to get bigger chunks at work, right?
As the owner, you mean? You as the owner.
Right. And I was a delivery guy in consulting. I'd never really been a pure salesperson and didn't know how to work that system quite the way you need to. So like I would start promoting people who are real go-getters and kind of had a sales instinct to try to go build a sales function that I didn't know how to structure myself. And so I called that job being Darth Vader's admiral, right? Like it sounds like a cool job until you get choked to death.
Sounds great.
Like 6 months later. So I think we went through 3 salespeople who were awesome employees and they all had to leave. It was terrible. I mean, I was just like, it was like ritual sacrifice or something. So what was happening was I was trying to get the hero people and, people emerge from your business that are just good at certain things and saying, oh, well, they can do anything. So let's have them go do sales. And really at this point, what was needed is to bring in a professional salesperson who knew how to structure an organization, right? They'd been at other companies. They'd been at maybe a bigger company. And so they they ran a part of a sales team in a bigger company. Now they want to run their own show. So that was a real key, was getting someone like that. And so then we, I say every time you double or triple at this point, when you get up to these levels, you're replacing 50 or 75% of at least the leadership team because
that's brutal, right?
It's brutal. Yeah. And so again, most owners don't want to do it. And that's why they stay small. And this is my message in Owner Institute, which is harsh, I know, but everything in a business is the owner's fault. They either hired it, did it, or allowed it to happen, right? So you have to look at yourself. Didn't do something, right? So every time something's broken and you're bitching about something, you got to go look in the mirror and be like, this is my fault. How do I have to go learn how to fix it, right? And I guess you can go get someone to fire people for you. But, I kind of took the Ned Stark view of like, you have to, if you pass the sentence, you got to give the punishment. So, it was really tough. And these are some people I had relationships with for decade too, and it comes down to like
people that you hadn't let go, you mean, that you had decade-long relationships with. Yeah.
And then I had to do it again at 10 to 15. So like, you look at it in that 5 to 10 kind of black hole phase. The real thing was actually going back and structuring some processes that I was good at and getting me out of them because like sales, right? So now sales had to be professionalized and moved beyond founder sales. Then we hit like 10 to 15. We got that and we started shooting up, right? And delivery broke, right? We didn't have consistent delivery. So I had to like get rid of a couple of long-term delivery people.
Why did delivery broke? Was that a people issue or was that something else?
So you're hiring massive amounts of people quickly. You don't have the systems in place to manage at that level. And so like while we're trying to react, like we've got a high pressure project and the people aren't responding well. And then the people I had in there, they were responding in old ways, but I don't think they knew what to do. And so they were kind of turtling, trying to hide from it. And I just realized, they don't know what they're doing. So I got to get people that know what they're doing. And so there were some people on the team that were really good. We moved them into new spots, but basically we had to rehire. I mean, we promoted some within and then rehired people and changed over again, 50% of the leadership team. And that really set us up.
And this was around the 10 to 15 million mark?
Yeah. And shooting past that. Yeah. And then there are other black holes as you go up, right? We're at 35 now. I think we kind of hit a black hole recently and we've been dealing with it now. So I think we're about to take the next, assuming we have a federal government in a couple of months, but so there's nothing I could do about that, but I think we're ready to take the next, and part of the next step was replacing me, right?
So talk about that a little bit more, where are you now?
Yeah, well, I realized like the business, so I stepped down as CEO in January 1st of 2025. I'd been kind of setting that up. I had promoted a woman to be president last March or April, something like that. So, she'd been operating. And this is what I say, again, going back to the owner freedom thing. Like when we got to that 5 to 10, there's a really good spot there where you're making good money. You're still really running the business, but you got it stabilized. But it's when I grew to that 10 to 15, chaos started again. And like, I got that to a point and I was like, I got that team readjusted. And it was really at that point, it's all about cultivating your leadership team. That's all it's about. And then their job. And one thing I noticed on this, some people had to leave because they were good at their job, but they weren't good at building a team under them. And I just didn't have time to wait 5 years for them to figure out how to be better managers and leaders of their team. So that became a critical factor. We had to move some people out because they couldn't do that. So finally we got that stabilized and I realized like, look, I'm an entrepreneur. I have all these ideas, right? Like I wanted to do this Owner Institute thing, right? I had this vision on it and I got a couple other things and I get into like, oh, AI is going to do this and this is going to do that. We got to try this. We got to try that. This marketing technique, that thing. And I just realized like at that level of a company, you're not rowing a dinghy anymore. You know, maybe we're not a battleship yet, but we're somewhere in between those two. And like, you can't just be like taking the wheel and going like this all the time. And so the more that it became about, you know, long-term strategy, execution on a set out strategy, the less good I was at doing it. You know, like I'm great, you know, so I'm still involved in strategic vision, looking at the market, like where's it going? You know, what should be the ultimate, you know, exit path for the company over time? What kind of areas should we be focusing on? I still engage with the team on those, but then I get out because I'm going to go take them down some wild goose chase on something that isn't very important for the company to do.
Did you know that pretty quickly about yourself when you got to this point?
No, I mean, after 15 years of doing it, I realized, and then I could start seeing the damage because everything's bigger, right? You know? And so it wasn't like a one-on-one thing where I had with a person would be like, oh, let's try this. And then it didn't work. And then I was like, all right, kill that. It would be something that I would get started and then it would like persist in the company for a long time and waste resources and time. And after a while, you're just like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like I'm not in personal contact with it every day. So you're making all these plates spin and they keep spinning after you leave. And then you didn't shut them down. And so now the company is drifting, right? So that at that point, you know, somewhere in there around 15, I brought in Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, which I should have done earlier, but that's from that book Traction. So we implemented that and we changed over the team. And now I think, you know, we're set up here if we get through our latest set of changes to really grow to the next level. And then it's another decision point. Like the current CEO has got to say, do I want to run a $75 million company, right? Am I ready to do that? Are all the people on the team ready to do that? Am I ready to own that? I don't know. So like at each phase, you're going to hit this wall and you got to think, everyone's got to think through what's going on, right? And so now I set things up where it's like, hey, like most likely where the company's going, we're going to take it in 3 to 5 year chunks. We're not really going to look past that because the company could be a completely different company. And as I say, like companies grow faster than people, right? So people can grow, they can change, but it's slow, right? Companies can take on a lot of work and grow real fast and go just shoot by the people that are running it.
Yeah. Yep.
And then for me, it was really a thought of like, hey, do I really want to get good at, say it's M&A? There's parts of that I like and I'll be involved in it, but like integrating an acquisition and being in a suit every day at some office and like talking to investment bankers all the time and like, I've got better things to do in my life. So no offense to anybody who's into that, but you know, you can come work for me, right? You know?
Right.
But I just realized like, not only do I not want to do it, I also don't really have the patience and skill set for it. So yeah. So I say even the owner has a point where they need to, but the problem is you're not able to hire the guy or gal to run your business until you're, I don't know. So I think you can get these various levels of freedom, right? In the 5 to 10 million range, I think there's a real sweet spot around 5. And that's where you can be making good money. You're still running the business, but you're starting to work on it some as well as in. And you can kind of get a decent schedule at that point. You know, someone could be working 40 hours a week and not going crazy and making good money, right? But then if you take on the growth, you go up to 10 and you go back into the 60-hour weeks, you know, or whatever it is. And then you kind of stabilize. And there's a good spot there too, 10 to 15. I found that harder to stay in a little bit. I don't know why. I don't know if it was just my personal experience, but at that point, the level of opportunities we're looking at started going up. So it just felt like the growth is pushing on you, and losing clients like takes big chunks out of the business. So you've got to always be after your stuff. So I felt like there was a lot more pressure. 5 was more comfortable for lifestyle. 10 to 15 was less so. Then when you get over that, there's a place where now you can, and at 10 to 15, I do think you could start looking at being out of the business. If you can stabilize it, maybe halftime or something. If you build that really strong team on the ish, but you're still going to have to be there because of that pressure on the business. And then I thought it was after we hit, it's hard to say because we went up really fast in a couple of years, but like in that 15 to 25 range is where I felt really comfortable putting in a full leadership team. And now my goal over the next couple of years is just governance, like building the oversight board. And then
so you're in the process of building a board now.
Right. And I'm in the process of like, can the team, evaluating it now, can the team replace members of the team when they need to, or do they need me to come back in? And I feel like they can now. So that makes it more sustainable, but you need that board and I need that function. And so I'm going to build that over a couple of years, and then, along the way, my goal is to teach owners like your business is your main asset, right? But you also should be building wealth on the side. So there's ways now there are certain businesses that are total rocket ships. They're just like in a space that's growing so fast. Like if you're an AI LLM company, you're going to put every dollar you got into growth, right?
Of course. Yeah.
But if you're like a accounting firm, you start doing this third thing where it's like a third goes to taxes, a third stays in the company to fund growth, and a third goes home to the owner, right? So I really feel strongly that as you're building that independence, you got to build the wealth. And then you don't have to sell, right? You can keep your company and it's producing cash for you. But it's not like a lot of owners grow their companies and they get bigger and they never can get any cash out of it because they keep making mistakes and they keep growing too fast and they blah, blah, blah. There's 1,000 reasons. And so they have to sell their company to get some money out of it. So if they don't get money out of it.
Right. Which sounds crazy.
I think it's probably the average company, right? So part of my methodology is teaching owners, hey, you're at this stage. Why don't we get some money out of the company, get it out into, I favor public index funds and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Not crazy private investments, but whatever. Owners will be owners, and they're all gonna do private real estate deals instead of buying publicly traded REITs. But there's only so much I can do.
Hey, there's only so much you can do, even.
Right.
Yeah.
So just get the money out of the company, and not everything. You got to keep money in for growth. But like you can toggle the switch, right? You can take a little money out for a year. You're going to be at 5 million, kind of sitting there, and then toggle back, keep all the money in, hire some people and grow, right? So like, if you're really conscious about it, you can figure out ways to turn things up or down, turn the dial up or down, instead of just like randomly doing stuff the way I did for a long time and most owners do. And then, they just create.
This is what Owner Institute is going to be about.
That's right. Help you be intentional about walking through these steps. Right. And taking, staying where you are for a while or forever if you want to, but just make a conscious choice, right? Don't sit there 3 years into it going, why aren't I growing? That's what I was sitting there doing, 4 million. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, is it me?
What did you imagine in the beginning, Alan? When you 2007, you started, did you think, how many years ago was that? 20, that's
18,
18,
right?
Some quick math, right?
Yeah.
Did you have any, obviously you said you didn't know what you were doing at the time, but did you have any, were you thinking ahead, 20 years from now, this is what I think this is going to be?
No, I mean,
do you think
there were companies in our space that grew really quickly and like exited and stuff. And so you'd be like, oh, I want to do that. So we weren't doing anything that would have resulted in that. Well, that's another thing that I realized along the way. And this depends on industry a bit, but I always wanted to do things in a different way. I always wanted to figure out some trick that would like make getting clients easier or doing this, or like a new service that would be like super innovative. And I think some of that could have worked, but I didn't have the discipline to do it. But over time, I just realized this industry works in a certain way, and just go figure out how it works, right? And go do it. Now, there are tweaks to it that you do, that you individualize. And like right now we have a big push into AI services, right? But we learned the government contracting game. And that was a real insight for me. It was like, stop trying to reinvent the whole system. If I want to go to Andreessen Horowitz.
What it is.
Yeah, if I want to go raise money and come up with some way and I have a 1 in 1,000 shot of succeeding, that's how you change the business, right? But like running a company that does work this way, you just got to learn some of the rules of the road, right? And that's another thing I think particularly is like know what your goal is. Like if you're trying to disrupt an industry, you have to have a disruptive solution. You have to go through the whole product market fit thing. You've got to go get funding. You're on a different path than like a professional services company working in the industry, right? It's two totally different things, you know? So, well, that was good.
Yeah. I mean, Owner Institute is you're basically going to be guiding people on how to work themselves out of their business as much or as little as they want to, which is, I think it's innovative.
Yeah. So we started up just a couple of weeks ago, really. So we got the website up at ownerinstitute.com. Go check it out. There'll be a newsletter starting very shortly. And then I'm putting the finishing touches on our methodology that it's going to be released in the next month or so. And so, yeah, we're going to be bringing people in. So I'm trying to figure out a kind of like a way to get the methodology out where there's some amount of self, you know, that someone can do it on their own a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably going to work best with a group or a coach. So we're going to probably try to structure some mastermind accountability group type things around it. And then, you know, some individual coaching. And then I think, you know, eventually we might try to start bringing in other coaches to use who've been through similar experience, you can kind of use the methodology. But yeah, we really I want to grow it into something that like, that's what I was looking for when I was sitting there late at night. And I found some of it with Greg. I found some of it in other books. Found some of it going to EO or YPO learning events. I found some of it here, some of it there. And it took me 10 years of hunting and pecking to put it all together.
So you're bringing this all in one place for people so they don't have to do that.
So you just get it faster. Yeah. So that's the key. And just remember the 3 core mistakes are not knowing where you are, right? So not understanding what the role is of the owner at that point. Trying to turn the business over to a guy or a gal, right? I'm just going to go, you know, hire someone and then they're going to take it over and go.
When it's not ready for
the
that,
golf
when you
course.
don't have the symptoms in place.
Right. And then the third thing is not being willing to make the tough decisions. So not being willing to fire the person you knew for 15 years, you know, that's really I mean, it's fine if owners don't want to do it, but I just want them to know why what's happening to them is happening to them so that they can make the choice, right? But those are usually the 3 things that we see is they don't know where they are and what their role should be. They go try to hire someone who can do it all for them, who can, and then they won't make the tough decision. And sometimes that also comes in like they won't make an investment, you know, that they need to because it's too expensive and something like that. And like, you know, I say investments often don't work out, you know, and that's why you make the big bucks because you take risks. And that's what I said, like earlier on, I didn't take a lot of risks, but later on when I'm putting huge money into things, like that felt like risks. And so a lot of them didn't work out. And that's the way business works. You go and do it again, figure it out.
Right.
So
then you better
check it out.
A lot to learn. Check it out.
Yeah, email me.
Stay tuned.
Alan, ALN at ownerinstitute.com. And we'll be doing more podcasts with other owners and me talking about this process. And hopefully it's helpful to people.
I think it will be.
Awesome. Thanks, Tanya.
Take care.
You've been listening to The New Rules with Alan Pentz. For more insights on mastering the new game, follow at @Pentz, that's APENTZ, on X, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, in today's world, you don't follow the rules, you write them.